Ian McKellen, at a fan event organized in London, did drop some shocking revelations that Gandalf and Frodo will be returning into the film The Hunt for Gollum. And in my second story, Simon Pegg has expressed his concern as to how possibly Quentin Tarantino's Star Trek film could have been divisive and not well received by fans. And also, Martin Scorsese's Film Foundation has partnered with an organization in Africa to help preserve African films. So we'll be talking about all these stories and more right here on the Film Mandate. My name is Papa Otu. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Film Mandate, where I bring to you movie news, reviews, and reactions, both from the African front and the international scene. And thank you for joining me for this very episode of the Film Mandate. So, we'll be delving into the very first story. And for those of us who have watched the Lord of the Rings franchises, and I'm sure for those who have read even the Tolkien books prior to the franchises, you can definitely, without a doubt, say that the source material and the Lord of the Rings films have been an intriguing franchise with very interesting stories that are very inspiring and very engaging, whether reading the books or watching the film. And we did see Hobbits, a follow up to The Lord of the Rings, where you had Peter Jackson returning to own the stories, zeroing in on the Hobbits to be specific. And it's been quite a while since Hobbit graced the silver screens. And now, prior to this year, it was said that Andy Serkis will be returning to direct the film The Hunt for Gollum. And as a matter of fact, that has already been confirmed with Peter Jackson and his partners getting on board to produce. Well, at a fun event quite recently organized in London, which had not just McKellen, but a number of the stars in the original Lord of the Ring films, he did drop some interesting revelations as to the return of Frodo and Gandalf. And that we can find in the variety.
And it's going to start filming in May. It's going to be directed by Gollum, and it's all about Gollum. But I'll tell you two secrets about the casting. There's a character in the movie called Frodo. And there's another character called Gandalf.
Can't wait to see the film The Hunt for Gollum return. And the world of the Lord of the Rings, it's very magical, an adventurous magical event. And it is a film that truly absorbs you into the the core of the story, and for a brief moment of whether 2 hours or whatever the duration might have been for all the six films that have come from the source material, you end up enjoying clearly whatever stories that are being told. And I'm not surprised that the Hunt for Gollum is being made, because when you watch the Lord of the Rings films, it drops some hints as to the backstory of the Gollum character that we never got to see, apart from some basic flashback as to how he came in contact with the ring, and then the ring transformed him. It ended up revealing the greed that once you have the ring, you don't want to let go of it. So it'll be quite interesting, just as they have confirmed, to go back in time to watch what transpired, how Gollum came into contact with the ring, the extended story surrounding his transformation and all that. And that is quite interesting. And I like the fact that having Andy Serkis, who who was the second unit director throughout the film franchises, is the one helming this. And not just that, but he's the one who also acted as Gollum. So he embodies the character and understands everything that makes up the character who he is. So for him to be directing, I think is just so perfect. And at least it gives the hands for Gollum a different angle and a different feel as compared to the prior movies that was told or directed by Peter Jackson, even though still this has the watchful eye of Peter Jackson on it. So personally, I think it is an exciting project. Unfortunately, we will not be seeing it till 2027. But then, what I'm fascinated about is the fact that uh, it's a prequel to The Lord of the Rings, giving us an entire perspective, even beyond or before the Lord of the Rings trilogy of films. So it is quite interesting. And the Gollum character, as we all watched in the Lord of the Rings film, was very fascinating. His greed and his desire to have the ring at all cost was perhaps one of the most fascinated capturing of action that Andy Serkis was able to realize on screen through his motion capture. And we all know, if you check a number of projects that Andy Serkis has done through motion capture, he's one of the best at it. Look at the Planet of the Apes. He was exceptional in that role as a Caesar. So there's a lot that the Andy Serkis I know will bring to bear, not just in terms of his acting, but in terms of him, directing this as well. And I like the fact that it is not just Andy Serkis and a different team altogether, but having the original team who were behind both the Lord of the Rings franchise, the trilogy, and that of also the Hobbit. So I'm excited about this project in particular because it means that it's the same people continuing this particular law of films, but the fact that you have Andy Serkis now taking the realms of this project is exciting because it will give it a different feel, a different angle and perspective from a different director, which is quite interesting. I admire Peter Jackson for taking that decision, which is what we need, because at least giving the directors of a different perspective, the voice to also bring to bear on the franchise. And not only are we going to get just one film from the hands of Gollum, but actually two. So it is exciting. But the big question here is the Ian McKellen and Elijah Wood coming reprising their role, or is it just going to be a name drop, or is it going to be a B-roll footage from some of the previous films? Those are questions that was not clearly stated. He only did say that he knows that the character Gollum, Gandalf, and what's it called, Frodo are going to be in the film. So as to whether it's a reprisal of a role, we do not know. But it looks very possible that that will be the case. And regardless of the age, the age difference between now and then, in between now and when the last Hobbits were made, you know they've advanced in age, both Ian McKellen and Elijah Wood. But with the advent of the aging technology, it's obvious that if they reprise their role and they are in the films, considering the fact that from some sources that I heard, the Ian McKellen's Gandalf is not supposed to age. But even let's assume that was the tribe. I mean, they have normal human life where they have to age. It means that this took place way before Hobbits and way before the Lord of the Rings. So it means that they have to look younger. And I think with the advent of the technology that exists today, it is very easy to drop their looks down to fit exactly how they looked in the Lord of the Rings, or even perhaps younger prior to the Lord of the Rings. So it is quite an interesting development, and I'm excited that we are having the great, Gandalf the Grey return because he is such an exceptional actor. Ian McKellen embodying that role of Gandalf was very exceptional in the films. From both the Lord of the Rings trilogy and to the Hobbit trilogy, he has always stand tall. I mean, no pun intended, but stand tall in all the films. And the British actors are always one of the best when it comes to embodying characters, and especially with such wonderful, amazing stories like the Lord of the Rings. I'm excited that he is returning to, for one more time, embody that role again. And it's unfortunate we don't have the likes of Christopher Lee and others, still alive. May their soul rest in perfect peace. But Gandalf, to have Ian McKellen, take part in this production is exciting. And I think is the right thing to do. It's not just the idea of a nostalgic moment, but that Gandalf, Ian McKellen, is the best person to portray it. Not to say that there are no other actors who can play the role, in that capacity in their own terms, but it is wonderful to have an actor, a living actor, embody that character throughout the series of films whilst he's still here with us. So personally, I'm excited, and I'm excited to see Elijah Wood, who also did exceptionally well in The Lord of the Rings. So for me, I'm looking forward to it, even though it's about 2 years ahead. The shooting date is May 2026, and I think the release date is in 2027. So obviously, it's still long ways to go. I'm sure they are still in their pre-production phase, trying to get everything ready before the movie production actually kickstarts. So I'm excited to look. I'm looking forward to this production. Let me know what you also are expecting. Are you expectant of this role? Are you excited about the fact that Ian McKellen and Elijah Wood are returning to their respective roles? Well, let me know what you think by dropping your thoughts in the comments section down below. So moving on from one big influential franchise to another, quite recently, Simon Pegg, actually, even yesterday, I did speak about Quentin Tarantino, how he did say that he has to cancel the movie critic because he felt that that film is too similar to Hollywood, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which he had directed. And even though he did write a sequel to it, he handed over the reins to David Fincher, who was interested to work on it with Netflix producing. And I did state briefly how interesting it would have been if he had gone ahead to direct the Star Trek film. Well, another actor of the franchise, actually not just an actor, but also a writer of the franchise, Simon Pegg, has, pardon me, I missed something briefly with my, pardon me, yeah. So I apologize for the little technical hitch over there. So Quentin Tarantino's Star Trek movie was inspired by a classic episode, and that's, in your short, is William Shatner. The story of for Quentin Tarantino and Mark L. Smith's Star Trek movie was reportedly set on a planet to Earth in the 1930s and would have pitted the Starfleet crew against gangsters. The creators seemingly took inspiration from the original Star Trek series episode A Piece of the Action, in which Kirk, William Shatner, Spock, Leonard Nimoy, and Dr. McCoy, DeForest Kelly will all visit a planet that's reminiscent of 1920s Chicago. Yeah, so according to Smith, he and Tarantino watched old gangster movies for inspiration, and they had a lot of fun while doing it. Despite the nods to Star Trek, the original series, Tarantino told Deadline in 2019 that the film would also have been reminiscent of one of his own crime classics, in his own words. So, and this is what he had to say, that it will be Pulp Fiction in space. That's Pulp Fiction-y aspect. When I read the script, I felt I have never read a science fiction movie that this That has this in it. There's no science fiction movie that has this in it. So that is Tarantino, from his own words. He did say that it would have been more pop fictiony, and I'm sure definitely it would have deviated from what the regular Star Trek films actually represents or looks like. And the unfortunate thing is that we will never get to see this, just as the article states that if it had not been for the fact that Quentin Tarantino wants to just end this directorial career with the 10th film, perhaps we would have seen how he would have realized this film on screen. But the interesting aspect is that if you are not a fan of Quentin Tarantino films, you are likely not to like this idea at all, particularly if you're a diehard Trekkie or diehard Star Trek fans who wants the integrity of the films or the yeah to be preserved as it is. Definitely Quentin Tarantino as a director wouldn't be for you. And I do agree that it would have been divisive, it would have been divisive among fans. But the other interesting aspect is that perhaps if he had gone ahead to do this film, if you are to liken any other film that goes a little off from the main theme and tones of its franchise, it can be likened to that of Andor in Star Wars, where Andor goes a little would I say R-rated. So then maybe it would have been something similar, but maybe lean in more into the crime drama that he wants to do. And knowing Quentin Tarantino, his dialogues are off the hinge, but it is quite interesting and different. It would have given it a different vibe altogether. And not just that, but when it comes to violence, Quentin Tarantino goes all out, almost like an anime style of violence, which if those who are diehard purist Star Trek fans, if they want, I mean, I'm wondering whether they will be okay with the kind of anime style of violence that sometimes Quentin Tarantino lends to his films. So that would have been perhaps a major problem with his inclusion to direct this particular film. But all the same, just as Simon Pegg said, it would have been quite interesting to watch and to see whether the audience would accept this branch of a film in the Star Trek universe, and that would have been interesting. Personally, I think that perhaps it could have been a pocket story, maybe a pocket universe where it exists within the Star Trek universe, but it's not really within the main storyline of perhaps Kirk or Spock, and they would have made us see. I mean, perhaps worm its way gradually to, if the audience accept it, then maybe it can be integrated into the main timeline and be considered as one of the main canonical films. But since it didn't take place, we would never have known how audiences would have received it. I, for one, I like the Star Trek films. I haven't watched all extensively, I must admit, but with the latest films that were made and some of the series like Stranger Worlds, I have watched a couple of them, and I like the Star Trek films, and I also like Quentin Tarantino's films. So the blend of the two, I would have been one of the audience for that without a shadow of a doubt and love it as it is. But I can't speak for others who may be purists to it, and I perfectly understand if perhaps they would not want Quentin Tarantino to touch what they really love, Star Wars purists. And I'm excited about the new Paramount takeover because currently, as it stands, it looks like they are moving on all fours to get it, one of get Star Trek going, because I believe that Star Trek is a potential franchise that needs the necessary juices to make it the best franchises ever. It's one of the biggest franchise, very entertaining, going into the places where no man has ever traveled to, and that is already exciting. I did enjoy all the films that J.J. Abrams spearheaded. Star Trek Into Darkness and Star Trek Beyond, which also had Idris Elba starring as is a clean pardon me but he acted as a villain in one. You also had Benedict Cumberbatch also playing the role of Khan in another, and they were all exciting films. Yes, I'm sure it could have been extremely far better than perhaps some of the divisions might have come, the latter ones might have caused. But all the same, for me, it was really entertaining, and I enjoyed all of them, and I was anticipating to watch more. But the good news is that Simon Pegg did state that a fourth film is possibly in the works. A fourth film. So it means that Paramount would get this done soon as possible. As to when, we do not know. But as it stands now, hopefully, I'm sure something is in the works. I don't know who may be helming the project itself. But regardless, it looks like with the new leadership at Paramount, Skydance Paramount, something good to be coming for all star, Trek fans. And I'm excited to hear that from Simon Pegg himself, who is not just an actor, but also an insider as well, as he happens to be a writer or wrote one of the Star Trek films. So let me know what you think. Are you excited about this particular development, seeing that there's potentially a Star Trek film? And also, would you have enjoyed Quentin Tarantino's Star Trek had it been made? Well, leave your thoughts in the comment section below. And moving on from Star Trek and Lord of the Rings franchise, we come to Africa, where a lot of great films have been shot in the past. And I can tell you of a fact that a number of the films that have been shot in the past are really good. Particularly, they were shot also on celluloid. But with time, a number of these films have been lost. And it is sad that we may never get to see some films that would have been very, that possibly was very key to the development of cinema in Africa. And quite recently, I did a story on The Eyes of Ghana, which is a documentary on the lost footage of the former president or founder of Ghana, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. And it's a project by the Obamas, and the story is about Kwame Nkrumah's personal cinematographer, who, though was instructed to destroy stock footages of the past leader, he decided to save them for posterity's sake. And I'm glad that the Obamas, together with the director, I keep missing the name, but the director, are trying to help not just tell the story of this event, but also to preserve the footage as well. And with that also comes another story, and that is from Martin Scorsese's Film Foundation, who has partnered with an African organization to see to it that the African films that were shot, particularly from before the 80s, are recovered and preserved. And this is captured in the story as seen on screen. And it says that preserving African cinema. So Professor Abubakar Sanogo Film Studies is a scholar of African cinema and works for the Pan-African Federation of Filmmakers, that is FEPACI. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. But it took him years to see one of the major films from the continent, Med Hondo's Solelo in 1969. Portrait of a Black immigrant in Paris was long revered, but widely unavailable. So Sanogo didn't see it until a print surfaced in Paris in 2006. Even in Burkina, the capital city, the capital city of African cinema, it wasn't available. Sanogo said from New York in early June, it's a huge problem. Sanogo was addressing a broader challenge facing the preservation of African film history and one that might be facing a brighter future. On June 7th, FEPACI, UNESCO, and Martin Scorsese's Film Foundation World Cinema Project signed a letter of agreement formalizing their partnership in the African Film Heritage Project, a joint initiative to preserve African cinema. But their work has already shown major results with Soleil O screening in the Cannes Classics section last month. The project will restore, disseminate in Africa and around the world a collection of the films from Africa that are historically, artistically, and culturally significant, Scorsese said at the event in New York. Later, he explained how his interest in African cinema grew out of his passion for Suleiman Sisse's 1987 sorcerer drama Yilen, which he saw on television. Eventually, he formed a relationship with Cisse and visited him in Mali. He was struck by a comment that Cisse made when they were both in Cannes for a different partnership in 2007. He said, if we don't try and restore African cinema made by Africans about Africans, then future generations will never know who they are, Scorsese said. Cinema is a perfect way to open up the mind and curiosity for other cultures. And then your short is a Sanogo and Martin Scorsese. So Professor Abubakar Sanogo, and then you have the celebrated filmmaker Martin Scorsese, and also you have the UNESCO Director General General Irina Bokova. General Irina Bokova. Yeah. So it is indeed a wonderful thing. Let me read the rest of the article. It says that broadening awareness for African cinema. For Sanogo, the new initiative opens up an opportunity to broaden awareness for African film history that has been marginalized for decades. With historical content, the older films can enjoy a new life in the classroom and repertory cinemas around the world. In many ways, the auteurist tradition in Africa is an experimental cinema, he said. That is part of its problem. Experimental cinema and audience appreciation don't always go hand in hand. So we are trying to bring these images back, not only to filmmakers, but Africans in general. He underscored a developing concern for educating film students in Africa about their heritage at a time in which film production has increased. Filmmakers are making films in Africa every day, Sanogo said. The advent of digital has made film medium more accessible. I took my students to Burkina in 2012 to study Burkina cinema. They dreamed to one day hold a piece of celluloid film and shoot on it. In film school, they simply didn't have celluloid to shoot on, but the energy and desire to make films has never been as high in Africa as it is today. Yeah, so I am so happy that we find ourselves in a time when this historical, these films, these classics are finding a new life, because most of these films, whether real life events that were captured for historical moments or classic films that have been made, I can tell you for a fact, I do not know about Soleil, or I do not know about most of the films that exist in the classics. And it's unfortunate. If I can mostly speak of Ghana in particular, most of the cinemas that existed that could project celluloid are no more. I mean, all the cinemas that could project celluloid back then, are no more, from the 80s or perhaps 70s. They are no more. And that, and with the military, the economy not being stable in terms of the political situations not being stable as a result of successive coups, there happened to be a time when cinema was not on the minds of Ghanaians at all. And the concern was to just survive. So the challenge was that a lot of these classic films, to tell the truth, was lost. And even if they exist, they are in a state that I don't know whether they are even redeemable. So to have the opportunity to for the Obama's working on restoring or saving the lost files of Kwame Nkrumah and a larger part of Ghana's history, and also to have UNESCO and Martin Scorsese's Film Foundation to want to salvage African cinema. For me, it's exciting, and I'm so happy about that, because you watch films from other countries and continents, and you can remember them clearly because they are online, they are on platforms like some of the streaming services, and you can watch them and be excited about it. Dating way back to the Orson Welles era, to the D.W. Griffith era. So even to the extent of when the first train ride, some of the earlier captures of cinema was just of a train, on the rails moving, and it scared a lot of people in the cinema. I remember watching a documentary about that, and that was very interesting. And yet, these films are still well stocked in the West. Unfortunately, here we don't have same, and I'm excited that at least the ones that are still in existence that can be salvaged. My hope that it receives that new life, so that most of us who are students of cinema and would want to watch and know our forebearers who began this film, we can get to know them, we can get to see the works they did and all that. And I remember reading one article. I know there was one filmmaker who started, prior to even Hollywood becoming Hollywood, in South Africa. He moved from America to South Africa to start, a Hollywood kind of cinema or industry, and he actually did. And out of the 60 or 70 films he made, on a sad note, it's only about 6 that is left, and all of the rest are lost. And it saddens me that we don't get to see films that are shot in Africa by Africans for Africans, even if it's not by Africans. At least it was shot in Africa, and it has preserved part of our history, immortalized on celluloid. And a lot of these films sadly can never be retrieved again, particularly the one from South Africa that had that filmmaker make it. Let me see if I can bring up his name, the one who started out Hollywood in South Africa, because his story was interesting. I wish I can bring it up. Let me see if I can get the name. Yeah, so yeah, it's unfortunate I can't get a name, but that was one of the interesting stories I developed. I found out way earlier, and it excited me so much. So it was during the 1900s, the South African, the film industry started in South Africa, and it was quite interesting. And let me see, I just want to see if I can get the person's name. Yeah. Anyway, in my previous episode, I did capture it, and it is indeed one of the most interesting stories I have ever read. And it's unfortunate that all these things have been lost to history, because out of the so many films that he did make, about 70 of them, it's only 60 that is left. So I'm excited that Martin Scorsese and the likes of the Obamas are helping out to preserve our, heritage. But I would also use this opportunity and platform to appeal governments to also lend a helping hand, because this is part of our history. These films that are rotting away in, not because we don't have proper storage facilities. These films ought to be rescued because they are part of our history, regardless of the differences we may have. we need to have all these films preserved, because that is the only way we can look upon and help build a better future film industry for us all to be entertained. We are entertained by other foreign countries' film industries, but one of the things they have done over the years is that they still have the past films, the classics, from the earlier days of cinema till now. From They have those old ones that they go back to watch to learn from. Unfortunately, we don't have same here in Africa, and we always have to, wait for some foreign entity or agency to reach out to preserve ours. So it is something that I will appeal to, not just UNESCO is doing their part, Martin Scorsese is doing their part, but on the larger note, even AU can do something about it. We need to have our stories told. We always say that if you don't tell your own story, someone will tell your story and put his or her own slight on it. So perhaps this is the time for us to recover all those films that we can possibly save and help shape our future film industries. I'm passionate about it. I don't know about you. So let me know what you think with regards to this story development where Martin Scorsese's Film Foundation is helping preserve African films. And I think their projection or their purpose is to make sure that by the year 2033 or so, they are able to recover 100 films, to put it in good condition to be shown to, Africans, and also be a part of, as an educational material as well. What do you think about this? I am excited about this because it's African heritage or history and classics being preserved. I don't know about you. Let me know what you think in regards to this good news that we have heard for African films to be preserved. So all too soon, I've come to an end to this episode with these three stories. I thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Film Mandate. I'll come your way tomorrow with another exciting episode as well. And I just want to also repeat again that I've been doing live stream since for some time now. So from Sundays to Thursdays from 11:45 p.m. GMT, 11:45 p.m. GMT from Sundays to Thursdays, I do live stream. So you can always join me on this platform. And then if you have any comments you want to, share, or anything you want us to talk about, you can do so by dropping it in the comment section below. So thank you so much once again, and I'll come your way tomorrow. My name is Papa Otu. I'll see you soon.